when they tell you. Good afternoon, New Orleans, or wherever you may be. It's 4 o'clock Wednesday, so this must be the Baldy and The Blonde show, except this week it's just me, Tom Coates, a.k.a. Baldy. Michele and The Blonde is on vacation, and she's not in studio, and she won't even be joining us by phone, so it's a little different format today. Our normal format is something like I say a bunch of stupid stuff and turn it over to Michele, and then I zone out, and Michele says a bunch of smart stuff. Then after a while, she kicks me under the table, and then we repeat the stupid stuff, smart stuff for a while, but not today. We're going to have a different format. So unfortunately, I got very short notice that I was going to be on my own, so I had some talking points that don't really apply, and I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about, but luckily, for a project I'm working on, I had some talking points and sound clips that I can just use we'll just make a show out of it today. It's basically a list of the most consequential lies we've been told by the corporate media and federal government. Now let's jump into it and see where it goes. The first one, it's not exactly a lie, but it was a horrific secret military plan that would have led to decades of lies and conspiracy theories had it been carried out. It was called Operation Northwoods, and it was presented to President Kennedy in March. The documents dated March of 1962. I'm not sure when it hit Kennedy's desk, but he rejected it, and it's a good thing he did because history, it would have changed. So again, the documents dated March 13, 1962. And to put that into historical perspective, the Bay of Pigs was April of 61, a year earlier, and the Cuban Missile Crisis was in October of 62. So this fell right in between. Again, it's called Operation Northwoods. What I'm going to read from, just a couple of minutes worth of excerpts. This is an attachment to the document, and the attachment is called Pretexts to Justify U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba. So basically what the U.S. was going to do was to do a bunch of false flag attacks, make it look like it was hostile Cubans attacking the U.S. base in Guantanamo and giving the U.S. a pretext to invade Cuba. So I'm just going to read some of the things on the list that they thought they might do. One says a series of well-coordinated incidents will be planned to take place in and around Guantanamo to give genuine appearance of being done by hostile Cuban forces. Now, here's some of the specific things they were going to do. Land friendly Cubans in uniform, acting as hostile Cubans, to stage an attack on the base. Another was to capture friendly Cubans, acting as hostile Cubans, inside the base, start riots near the base main gate. Again, that would be friendly Cubans doing that, posing as hostile Cubans. Blow up ammunition inside the base, start fires, burn aircraft on the base, lob mortar shells from outside the base into the base. Again, this is Guantanamo. Someone's going to die here. This would be U.S. military personnel. Somebody was going to be injured or killed here. Sabotage a ship in the harbor, large fires, sink ship near the harbor entrance, conduct funerals for mock victims, have a remember the Maine incident could be arranged. These are all quotes, by the way. I'm directly quoting from this document. We could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. So apparently that was going to be carried out against U.S. civilians in Florida and maybe Washington, D.C. Again, quoting, says, we could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, parentheses, real or simulated. So they were considering murdering Cuban innocents. Let's fast forwarding here. Use of MiG-type aircraft by U.S. pilots could provide additional provocation. Harassment of civil air, attacks on surface shipping, and destruction of U.S. military drone aircraft by MiG planes could be useful as complementary actions. So again, it's one false flag attack after another. And again, none of these were done because Kennedy killed this plan. Quoting again, it is possible to create an incident which will demonstrate convincingly that a Cuban aircraft has attacked and shot down a chartered civilian airliner en route from the U.S. to Jamaica, Guatemala, Panama, or Venezuela. Now, the next part's too long to read, but I'll paraphrase it. Basically, they're going to put a civilian aircraft of military personnel, pretend they're college students going on vacation. Then they're going to fly a drone up parallel to that plane, and then safely land that plane with the people on board, shoot down the drone, and then spread debris and let the other countries in the Western Hemisphere find the debris and report on it. That way the U.S. wasn't selling it. It was being sold for them. But it was, of course, all fake, all staged. Next is, it is possible to create an incident which will make it appear that communist Cuba MiGs have destroyed a U.S. Air Force aircraft over international waters in an unprovoked attack. Of course, we're provoking everything in this scenario and lying about everything. Now, all of that is very disturbing, chilling, but the most disturbing sentence in the entire memo that I was just reading from is the last one, and it's this, quoting, "It is understood that the Department of State also is preparing suggested courses of action to develop justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba." What that makes that so chilling is the Department of State, that's our diplomats. Why are our diplomats planning military interventions or pretexts for military interventions in Cuba? So there you have it. Again, that's quoting from Operation Northwoods, and that's just a small portion. There's way more than that. But that was just some of the examples of the false flag attacks that were planned by the U.S., blame it on Cuba, and then give us a pretext to invade Cuba. So, of course, that leads to the question is, how many other incidents have there been in U.S. history that were straight up fake? This was the only one. Kennedy killed this plan, but how many plans have gone forward? We don't know. But when things look suspicious and they just don't smell right, and there's even slight evidence of a false flag, it makes you wonder if it indeed is a false flag. We've tried it before. So now that leads into, how much time we got, Kobe?
Got 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Okay, so I will. I'm just going to lead into the next one, and so what I've got for this series of lies by the media and the government, I've got some notes that I'll paraphrase, and then I'll play some sound clips. The notes are basically the backstory, and then the clips that I found will give you some specifics about it. Now, the first one. Now, for our younger listeners, a lot of these are before your time. Like Kobe, you probably have never heard of any of these. And if you hadn't, I wouldn't be surprised. It's not like they teach this stuff in school. They should, but they don't. Now, the first one is the false testimony of a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl named Naira that helped sell the Persian Gulf War in 1990. The backstory is this was in October of 1990. We'll play the clip and go into more details on the other side of the break. But in October of 1990, it was 2 months before the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, at a hearing of the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus, this girl, Naira, she went by only her first name, she gave testimony that Iraqi soldiers came into a hospital and killed newborn babies. So that was pre-internet, and yet still, without the internet and any social media, this went wildly viral. This made worldwide news because of the alleged atrocities carried out by, again, it was all a lie, but these alleged atrocities carried out by the Iraqi army. Anyway, this is Tom Coates without Michele Godin. Today, we are Baldy and the Blonde when we're together. Today it's just me. We'll be back on the other side of the break. We'll finish that story. Welcome back to the Baldy and the Blonde show. Unfortunately, today it's just me, Tom Coates, flying solo without the great Michele Godin. If you're just tuning in, the theme of today's show is the most consequential lies told by our federal government and the lying corporate media. They tell lies all the time, but these are the most consequential ones, things that led to death, destruction, lots of wars, that sort of thing. The first one, we're about to play a tape of, in 1990, you might remember there was a Kuwaiti girl named Naira who helped sell the Persian Gulf War with her testimony. Kobe, that is clip number 4. Can you play that?
Volunteered at the Al-Adan Hospital with 12 other women who wanted to help as well. I was the youngest volunteer. The other women were from 20 to 30 years old. While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators, took the incubators, and left the children to die on the cold floor.
Okay, that's quite the story, except every word of it was a lie, all of it. And as I mentioned before the break, this was in the pre-internet days, of course. This was 1990, and still this story went viral. It's swept the world because it was so dramatic, but every word was a lie. We learned in January of 1992 that Naira, I think I'm saying that right, she had never been a nurse. Her father was a Kuwaiti ambassador to the U.S. at the time of her testimony. And get this, she and her father were members of the ruling family of Kuwait. She'd been coached to do this. It also came out that her testimony was part of a wider $10 million public relations campaign to build public support for the U.S. war against Iraq. The PR campaign was coordinated by the firm Hill and Knowlton, which was headed by a guy named Craig Fuller, who just happened to be chief of staff to George Bush the Elder when Bush was vice president. They did a great job selling in the war. It resulted in Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, otherwise known as the Persian Gulf War. So that's a massively consequential lie told to us by our government and the lying media. The next one, this one is of major historical importance. This was Colin Powell's presentation to the United Nations Security Council. This was in 2003. He did a PowerPoint presentation explaining that because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and was prepared to use them, the U.S. and many other countries basically just needed to invade Iraq right away. Spoiler alert, everything he said was a lie too. The war started 6 weeks later. It lasted till 2011 and resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands and some estimating even over 1 million. So that is clip number 5. What we're going to hear is not his presentation. We all know what he said. He said that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, was ready to go with them, and we needed to invade. What you're going to hear is an interview that he gave on Larry King in 2010 talking about that.
A lot of people counted on you.
I know.
You changed the ball.
I turned the dial. There's no
Yeah, you
question
did.
about it. And that's what the president wanted me to do and what I was supposed to do.
You regret it.
I regret it now because the information was wrong. Of course I do. But I will always be seen as the one who made the case before the international community. But there wasn't a word in that speech, in that presentation, that was not vetted and approved by the intelligence community.
Are you ticked?
Yeah. I swayed public opinion. There's no
did.
question about it. But for months afterward, when we didn't find any weapons of mass destruction, we didn't find the biological vans or any of that, until 6 or 8 months later, the intelligence community still insisted that the items were there, and they weren't.
There on that interview, he admitted it's all lies. He's ticked, and he said he was fooled, and maybe he was. He said that he spent several days with the CIA insisting that that stuff is well vetted before he goes forward with it with the UN. He was assured it was. And I have no reason to doubt him. But the point is, he was fooled, the world was fooled, and hundreds of thousands of deaths, maybe over 1 million deaths, resulted. Hey, Baldy and The Blonde are back. Actually, just Baldy is back. This is Tom Coates. Michele is not in studio and not on the phone today. I'm just by myself. Anyway, the theme of the show is basically the most horrific, most consequential lies told by a federal government and the lying corporate media, lies that have resulted in cover-ups of very important historical events, led to wars, death, destruction, etc. These are not few and far between. It's constant throughout history. Here's one. This one is not as well accepted as a lie in the public as many of the others. Roosevelt knew in advance about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Yes, this one is absolutely real, at least according to a 1946 report by the Army Pearl Harbor Board, Navy Court of Inquiry, and other bodies. I don't have any sound clips for this, so I'll just read some excerpts from the report. I'll be quoting from the report, but I will be skipping ahead in places. Quoting, State Department, War Department, and Navy Department had a reasonably complete disclosure of the Japanese plans and intentions and were in a position to know what were the Japanese potential moves that were scheduled by them against the United States. Therefore, Washington was in possession of essential facts as to the enemy's intentions. This information showed clearly that war was inevitable and late in November, absolutely imminent. The messages sent to Hawaii gave only a small fraction of this information. No direction was given the Hawaiian Department based upon this information except the, quote, do-don't message of November 27, 1941. Okay, so now I'm not quoting. I'm just going to explain what the do-don't message was. The do-don't message was a vaguely worded message to Lieutenant General Walter Short, telling him that negotiations with the Japanese had reached a stalemate, that hostilities might ensue, and that he wasn't to do anything to alarm civilians or provoke war. He was the General Short, that is. He was the U.S. military commander responsible for the defense of U.S. military installations in Hawaii, and he was the one who should have been notified and wasn't. Now, quoting back from the report, it says, the disaster of Pearl Harbor would have been eliminated to the extent that its defenses were available on December 7 if alerted in time. The War Department had the information. All they had to do was either to give it to General Short or give him directions based upon it. So that's as clear as can be. This is a declassified, formerly top secret document that was reported by the Army Pearl Harbor Board and the Navy Court of Inquiry and a couple other bodies. And there was congressional hearings. This was the report. It says clear as day that Washington knew about this, and yet somehow this is crazy conspiracy theory to this day, where, of course, it should be in history books if we're taught honest history, which that doesn't happen. Let's see. Here's a very consequential one because it turned an election. This one did turn the 2020 election, the Hunter Biden laptop. So the backstory on that is in April of 2019, Hunter Biden dropped off 3 damaged laptops. It wasn't just one. He dropped off 3 damaged laptops to a repair shop, but he never came back for them. So contractually, they became property of the shop owner. Then in December of 2019, the shop owner alerted the FBI that he had found evidence of suspicious monetary transactions and, shockingly, a large number of pornographic images. But if you know Hunter Biden, well, at least of his reputation, you're not surprised by that. The FBI immediately, within a few weeks, confirmed that the laptop was legitimate, and yet still we were told for years that it was a fake. So that was in December of 2019. The FBI validated it. But it wasn't made public. This wasn't public until September 2020, when the shop owner, he read a report by some Senate committee. It was a report about influence peddling by members of the Biden family. And so he saw that report, so he contacted Congress about what he had seen on the laptop. And then in mid-October, just a few weeks before the election, the New York Post published the first in a series of reports on how Hunter Biden had helped his business associates gain access to Joe Biden while Joe was vice president. And then, lo and behold, 5 days after that, 51 former senior intelligence officials published an open letter stating that the laptop, quote, has all the classic earmarks of a Russian misinformation operation. Then when they were called on that later, when it was indeed validated that the laptop was legitimate, I don't know which of those 51 signees said this, but he said, we didn't say that it was a Russian information operation. We said it has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. So they left themselves some wiggle room, and they used that wiggle room when they were called on it. But of course, the corporate media spread this lie nonstop, and social media platforms canceled anyone who questioned the official lying narrative. And the reason that, obviously, that lie was so consequential was because it resulted in the election being turned, and the U.S. had its first mummy president in the form of Joe Biden. Now, just one example of just how egregious and horrific and obvious this lie was. There was tons of examples. We're going to play a clip that was from CBS on how they reported on this laptop. Kobe, that's clip number 1.
Experts say it has all the hallmarks of information laundering.
This looks like your classic disinformation campaign.
Eric O'Neill is a former FBI operative.
Steal the information with a cyber attack, get the emails from Hunter Biden's account, and then put them on these laptops that are left at a repair store. And that's how the information is now laundered into the public.
Who do you think is behind this?
Well, the Russians would be my number one.
Oh, sorry. No, keep going. I'm sorry. I talked
guess.
Okay. Sorry, I totally talked over the end. I thought it was looping back. So, yeah, you heard that? Yeah, Russians are my number one. And he doesn't believe a word he's saying, but he says Russians are his number one guess. And how did they do it? Well, they hacked the emails, and then they planted the emails onto the computer that had been left at the repair shop. Anybody could see from the first few minutes of this report that this laptop was real. was obvious to me, and maybe it's just because I know that everything is, I just start with the assumption everything's a lie. Turn out I'm always right if I just believe that. This guy's saying, well, they could have hacked his email and then planted it on the computer that was in the repair shop. Then obviously it was the Russians doing this, if I had to guess who it was. I mean, it's absurd on its face. Now, closely related to that lie, and very consequential, was the lie that Joe Biden was sharp and at the top of his game. Soon after Joe Biden was sworn in as America's first mummy president, it became obvious to a lot of us that he was seriously diminished and that those around him and the corporate media were trying to cover up for him. And this went on for years, right up before his disastrous performance in that debate in June of last year. So here's a small sample of what the media was saying. And I'm not sure when these are from, but I think it was like right up very close to the time of that debate. And that's clip 2.
His mental acuity is great. It's fine. It's as good as it's been over the years.
President Biden, who I've been around numerous times just in this last year, is sharp, he's focused, he's bright.
This is a man who is sharp, who is on top of his game, who knows what's going on.
He's smart, he's on his game.
Smart, sharp, on his game. His acuity is like I've never seen before. We all know what we've seen for the last few years before they said this. We all know what we saw in that debate. Obviously, they were lying. It's not like they got fooled like maybe Colin Powell was. These were straight up lies. They covered him for years. There's no way he should have served out his term. We should have at least known who was running the country. And in my opinion, I think that's literally the biggest scandal in the history of the country, is that we went 4 years not knowing who was running the country. Now, related to this is Joe Scarborough on MSNBC on his show in March 6 of last year, after years of Biden showing his dementia. Let's hear clip 3.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it. And you read the New Yorker interview. If you want to know the truth, read that interview. And you'll sit and read through that and you go, oh my God. Just no comparison between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Historians will look back and they will say, why was this race close in February and early March? Because it makes no sense. And you've been around Biden enough to know he's not going to run a 4.22 at the combine, but he might damn well save Western democracy from Russia.
Yeah, because he's so sharp, intelligent, brilliant, strong, whatever adjective you want to use, that he was going to save America, democracy from Russia. Okay, thank you, Joe. Every single word was a lie, and attempting to turn an election, cover for a president, cover for many others who had covered up for Biden over the years. Because, I mean, no one's going to jail over this, but 4 years not knowing who was running the show. All we're told is right up before this debate, he's sharp, brilliant. So when we can all see the opposite. Anyway, this is Tom Kowitz, Baldy and the Blonde, back on the other side. Baldy and the Blonde are back. Actually, that's not technically true. Just Baldy is back. Me, Tom Kowitz. Michele Godin is out of the studio and not on the phone, so it's just me without Michele Godin. Theme of the show, if you're just tuning in, is the most egregious, horrific lies, and there's a lot to choose from, told by the lying corporate media and the federal government, but particularly lies that really led to some horrific things or covered up some horrific things. Next one on the list is the crash of TWA Flight 800. Again, for our younger listeners, you might have never even heard of this or even heard of TWA. So TWA was Trans World Airlines. It was a major airline until it was acquired by American Airlines in 2001, something like that. TWA Flight 800 was a Boeing 747 that exploded and crashed into the Atlantic Ocean on July 17, 1996, 12 minutes after taking off from JFK Airport in New York, killing all 230 people aboard. So the National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the probable cause was explosion of fuel vapors in the central fuel tank. They never did figure out what ignited it, but they said that most likely caused by a short circuit. But again, another story that just seems like a fairy tale. Navy ships were in the area that day where the plane was, and many eyewitnesses described seeing what they described as a flare or some kind of a firework rising in the air toward the plane and exploding near it. The obvious alternative explanation among us conspiracy theorists is that the Navy accidentally shot it down. And for those who insist that if the Navy had done that, then certainly someone would come forward. Well, someone has come forward. We're going to listen to a man named William Teal III. He joined the U.S. Navy in July of 1994 and was stationed on the USS Carr at the time of the TWA 800 catastrophe. And what we're going to hear is an excerpt from an interview with the Duke report he gave in 2022. That's clip number 8.
Once we locked the plane up, here's exactly what happened from inside the ship. The track supervisor got the report from the other track supervisor of the ship that fired that we had the contact locked. Contact track number, I don't remember what track number it was. We all repeat the track number before we fire. The track numbers is how we indicate and confirm that everyone has the same picture of the same contact. So we gave the track number, positive ID, standby, birds away. Birds away was an indication, let us know we fired missiles. But what I heard in that conversation was birds away, salvo size 2. That indicates 2 missiles. So when we heard that, we stand by for BDA. BDA stands for Battle Damage Assessment. As I'm listening to the link coordination, about 4 or 5 minutes goes by, and then I can sit here, splash. That means that it's a hit. Then all somebody say, wait a minute, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not a splash. We hit an Airbus.
He says straight up that they fired, now not his ship, not the ship he was on, it was another ship, fired 2 missiles, and honestly, I don't know. It may have come 1 missile from one other ship and another missile from a third ship, but the USS Carr did not fire. But 2 missiles were fired at what he called an Airbus. That was the 747, that was TWA Flight 800. Later in the interview, William Teal names names. He mentions 2 names of some of his peers that were working close to him, and he also named the commander of the USS Carr that he overheard the commander's side of the conversation that day immediately after it happened. So again, when you'll hear some people say, well, if there was a conspiracy, somebody would come forward. Well, somebody has come forward. And besides that, there were, I'm not sure how many witnesses to the event, but there was something like 24, all gave similar accounts. So here we have it, 230 souls lost that day, reportedly by William Teal, who was on that ship, shot down by the U.S. Navy, covered up for years, and, well, will forever be covered up. Next up, you know what? Let's just go to, okay, let's go to 9/11. That the official story is a lie has not at all been widely accepted, but given that every damn thing seems to be a lie, maybe this one someday will get more traction. And nobody knows the real story. We just suspect that the story we're being told is not true. And we could do a year's worth of shows on this topic and not cover everything. So for now, we're just going to go to 2 eyewitness accounts, one at the Pentagon and one in New York City. At the Pentagon is CNN reporter Jamie McIntyre. He was on the scene very soon after the incident there, and he got a close-up look. And we're going to hear what he reported from the scene. That's clip number 9.
From my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual side of the building that's crashed in. And as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon and then caused the side to collapse. Now, even though if you look at the pictures of the Pentagon, you see that the floors have all collapsed, that didn't happen immediately. It wasn't until almost about 45 minutes later that the structure was weakened enough that all of the floors collapsed.
So J.B. McIntyre was there on the scene. He said he did a close-up inspection. He said there was no evidence of a plane crashing anywhere near the Pentagon. And if you look at the photos from that day, the lawn was pristine and the structure eventually collapsed. But before it collapsed, for something like 45 minutes after impact, it was intact with kind of a small hole in it. And then years later, they released what they said was video evidence of a plane hitting, and then when you see it, you don't see the plane at all. Now, I want to play number 10 real quick. This is an interview from a 32-year veteran of the New York Fire Department named Rudy Dent, what he saw Building 7 collapsed in New York that day.
I saw Building 7 come down. There was an explosion. The building did come down in complete classical controlled demolition. It came down on its own footprint. There's no question about that.
They're saying that blaming it on office fires.
Well, if it wasn't so serious a situation, that would be completely laughable. That is ridiculous. First of all, our guys were up there. They were calling for additional hand lines to mop up the isolated pockets of fire. And let me just explain one thing. Never in the history of the world, never in the history of high-rise skyscrapers has a skyscraper ever come down because of fire.
It never happened before. It's never happened since. It happened one time to Building 7 on 9/11. Building 7 was a third tower that collapsed that day, late in the afternoon. It was not hit by a plane, and it collapsed straight down into its own footprint. And for about 2.25 seconds, it was at free fall speed. Free fall speed can happen only if all supporting structure is gone at the same time. And that's usually because of a controlled demolition. And that's what this 32-year veteran firefighter said he believes happened. Anyway, thank you for listening. This is Tom Kowitz without Michele Godin. We will be back next week, 4 o'clock on WGSO. Check us out at baldyandtheblonde.com.